Alright guys, welcome back to a new tier list. We have the TCG tier list after the new Banlist. And before we get the new release of the new core set Phantom Nightmare in February, because this will be an overlay time where after that some things will change and the fire decks will even be more dominant. So we have the TCG Banlist yesterday. If you have not seen this, or the day before, I have linked this up in the top right corner. You can check that out. We have made a reaction video to that, and now we want to rank these decks here. We have top tier 1.5, tier 0, and then tier 3 and Rogue-ish. And we are starting off with Centurion, which has just recently been released in the new Valiant Smasher set. A lot of people were expecting the King Calamity ban because this is the main play that the deck has. It has a very easy access to the King Calamity, basically locking your opponent out of playing his complete turn, which can be very strong. And this deck had some nice showings through some regional tournaments. Also, I think had a few tops, like 1 or 2 in the at the current YCS in Bologna, and I also think that not a lot of people brought this deck, so this is obviously always something that you have to keep in mind, but unfortunately not nothing that we have statistics on, because we always see, when we see the YCSs or big events, we always see how many decks were brought, how much percent of the whole decks are, for example, Unchained, Rescue Ace, but the thing is, they never show us how many decks those were in like total numbers, so we can never really tell how much percent of the decks brought to the day one basically also reached the top cut. So you might only see like 2 Centurions and then, I don't know, 8 Rescue Ace decks, but might also be the case that there were only like 10 Centurion players but like 50 Rescue Ace decks, Rescue Ace players, which then would mean that Centurion could be the better deck because it had a better top cut percentage conversion rate, but we never get those numbers here. But as I already said, Centurion still has its main play intact and is really consistent. Obviously you can play a lot of hand traps in this deck. I think as of right now this is a solid tier 1.5 deck, though I think we will sort this at the like lower end of the spectrum. We have Branded Chimera, which definitely is strong, in my opinion stronger than the normal Branded Despia. Can set up some nice negates, though I think is getting power crept a bit by the decks that we will put up here in the top tier, and so I'm not quite sure whether we will see a lot of Branded Chimera tops. We also have not seen a lot of Branded Chimera tops in the major events, though Branded Chimera has topped some regionals. For now, I would put it here in the tier 2 category, but we will see whether we will change the tiers or the decks in the tiers up after we have finished. This is also a very cheap deck, so if you want to invest, then you can get this for around about 90 euros over on Card Market, so that's quite cheap. We have Exosister here, and that is because I think decks that can play Shifter will be quite strong in the next format, because one of the strongest decks, spoiler alert, will be Fire King together with probably Rescue Ace and then Labyrinth, but decks that can play Shifter, and that's also why Florent Reese is here, are definitely nice because they present a problem for these decks, as they need to play with the graveyard. This is the only reason why I have Exosister here, and I would probably put Exosister somewhere at the top of tier 2. It's not the best deck overall in general, but the ability to play Shifter is something that can just basically catapult your deck to being tiers higher than it would normally be, because the meta game is so so damaged by playing Shifter, right? And we also have Shifter still at free Shifter, a card that has not got hidden by the banlist, so I think this might be quite strong. We have Purrely, which is was recently on a down climb, you could say, and now has also the Sleepy Memory to 2, which means we can now not draw 6 cards, and it's also now that we have to pick a Delicious Memory and then double Sleepy to get into our following place. So what do I think of this deck? I think this is still better than the decks in the tier 2 row. I think this is still a solid deck, and if more people are not prepared for the deck, that definitely helps the deck. So if it goes down in playability, then less people will have an answer for an Purrely Noir, and now with you having to search either your Delicious or your Sleepy Memory, you might now more often end up with the Delicious, which then gives you a Purrely Noir that can not or will not return to the extra deck via the trap on the next standby or on the next end phase, sorry. So this could definitely be strong, especially if not a lot of people are preparing for it and not like putting a Herald of the Abyss in the side deck, for example. We have Florent Reese, which basically is the same idea with Exosisters, though I think it's better than Exosisters. Obviously it has its consistency problems, but it also has the trap, the Harpy's Feather Storm, that can also basically erase one turn of your opponent, which is very strong. You can search the trap with Triple Tactics Thrust, which normally this would be a very cheap deck, but you want to play your thrusts, so this is then a bit more expensive. I think the shifter decks can definitely sneak in some wins and might steal one or the other top card, or maybe might even steal a total event top at YCS or at regionals, because shifter is just that strong. We have Infernoble Knights that really got hit hard, and now it's rogue deck. No, I'm not quite sure, honestly. Because I am not super familiar with the Infernoble Knight archetype. I have seen that Peck has posted a new video talking about the combo without the Isolde. I think this can still work, and this has also access to the Wanted engine, which the Wanted engine is just insane. It's just broken. It's super strong, and all the decks that can access the Wanted engine tend to be on the higher tiers here. So I think that Infernoble Knight is not like dead or something. I would not probably wouldn't put it in Rogue, but it's definitely at the bottom of the tier 2 category. Then we have Kashtira, which has recently gotten the Unicorn back to 3, which is quite nice, more consistency for the deck, and another deck that can play shifter. And over on Yu-Gi-Oh! Scope, which is the win percentage website for dueling books, this is performing quite well. So in my opinion, this could be one of the best decks that can play shifter, and might even be in the tier 1.5 category. Correct me if you think it could be something else. Let me know in the comments what you think of my placements here. But I think this could be very strong, especially because of shifter. Then we have Labyrinth, which obviously is one of the top tier decks. We have recently seen in the last YCS that Labyrinth, it was always around, right? And it was always a good deck, and nothing has really changed at this moment. But we have now seen that a lot more people took it to the event, and a lot more people topped with it. Also, we are getting new support for the deck in January with the Transaction rollback, which is an insane trap card. So this will definitely be the strongest deck from the 17th of January forwards, until we get a Phantom Nightmare, where we will then get the support for all the fire archetypes, which we will talk about in a moment. But I think Labyrinth will definitely be a deck that is on top of the ladder. We have Manadome, which has not gotten any hits on the ban list, though has not really or wasn't really able to show a good result in the recent YCS, which is something you always have to keep in mind. I still think this is a tier 1.5 deck, and I would also place it in front of Purrely. I think, I'm not quite sure if I would place it. I guess I would also place it in front of Centurion. Let me know what you think of this. We have the normal branded deck, which is definitely also quite strong, but I would put this in a tier 3 rogue-ish category, even though this has got the was it the third or fourth place at the most recent YCS. I think this was kind of a lucky streak, to be honest, because this deck cannot really put up any interruptions. And I mean, Mirror Jade is definitely strong, that's sure, but I don't think that this deck will be very impactful come the next meta. Then we have Rescue Ace, which definitely has got some hits from the ban list, but I think is still one of the top tier decks, even though we have the Airlifter 2-1. We have a Wanted engine. We will get new support with the Bonfire, and then the Snake Eye stuff, and the Promethean Princess. So there is big things to come for Rescue Ace. So this is definitely one of the top decks, but I might have also spoiled that before when I talked about which decks will be on top here. We have Rika, which has gotten hit really hard. I think they need to think about a different combo line now, and I will also put this at the tier 3 rogue-ish category. Probably there will be people topping with it, as there always are. It's always the random person topping a YCS with Rika. And I mean, this deck is really strong if it can play through. And we might see if, like for example, Labyrinth and Rescue Ace, also Fire King will be the top decks. We might see Droll and Knockbird being a bit less prominent, and then obviously this would be great for Rika. We have a hand trap heavy format at the moment, and this is bad for Rika. So we will have to see how the meta develops. If we are entering a more bot breaking heavy meta, then this is definitely great for Rika, and then we might also have to put it up here in tier 2. We have a Runic or Runic variants, which Joshua Schmidt had recently topped the YCS with his Runic Bestial variant, of course. I think Runic and everything that belongs into this engine is still quite viable, and I would put it somewhere here in the tier 2 category. Not too crazy, but definitely not bad, and also has once again avoided any hits, so that is definitely something that speaks for the deck. We have Fire King, which is definitely one of the best decks. This lineup on the top here will change once we have a Phantom Nightmare. So I think before Phantom Nightmare, it is something like this, especially if Labyrinth, or when Labyrinth get the new support card, the transaction rollback on the 17th of January. I think this is how it looks like. And then after we have all the supports for the two fire decks here, for Fire King and Rescue Ace, I think then we will have a bit of a different picture here. I think then Fire King will be the best deck, then Rescue Ace, then Labyrinth. This is my prediction, but as I said, as of right now, I think this is the correct order here. Also, the Fire King into Labyrinth matchup is really nice for Fire King, so that's also speaking for the deck when we have Phantom Nightmare. We have Dragon Link, Striker Dragon here, not really got hit here, and yeah, not really a lot of showings in the recent YCS or at regionals, but I still think a very solid deck. Tier 1.5, I think if you can play the deck, if you know how to operate it, it can still be very strong. Though one thing that has to be said is that obviously if you run a big Bestial package, that's not that great against Rescue Ace or against Fire King. It's quite nice against Labyrinth. There are some targets you can banish, some valuable targets like the Coup Clock, for example. Well, I think even the Arias is dark, if I'm not wrong here. So I think that Dragon Link definitely has its place here in the 1.5 category, though I would not place it over these decks here. We have Tearlaments, which definitely, in my opinion, was the biggest loser of the ban list, together with Infernoble and Unchained. Tearlaments, I think this is somewhere at the bottom of tier 2. This can still do some things, but without the millers, it's very, very rough. This was already a very random deck, and you definitely did not want the deck to become more random here. So I think this is somewhere at the bottom here, though I think it's still over Infernoble Knight, though I'm not quite sure how this will work out without Isolde, so I might be wrong here. And then we have Unchained, definitely a deck that was hit quite hard by the ban list. Unfortunately, I really like this deck. Also was thinking about playing it, but I wanted to wait until the ban list because I was expecting some hits, so I invested into Fire Kings. Good for me, I guess. Unchained, okay, we have to see how the deck will perform without the Shivaras, the two Shivaras. Maybe you play an additional Shayama, which you can then use to make your DD Wave King High Caesar. I think in the end it will end up somewhere here in the tier 2 category. Unfortunately not as consistent as it's right now. And then we have Vanquish Soul, has definitely topped a lot recently, and that is something Pack mentioned in his tier list video. A good take, by the way, that this deck can in its engine or in its main deck play Ghost Mourner, not Ghost Mourner, play the Ghost Girl that can influence the graveyard. Ghostbell and Haunted Mansion, that's what I wanted to say. And that's obviously quite nice against the Wanted engine and also against Labyrinth, Big Welcome Labyrinth, that is. Also, the engine of Vanquish Soul is quite nice and relatively consistent. Sometimes you don't open your Raisin and then you're a bit sad, but I think this is one of the tier 1.5 decks, and I would even place this here in the middle over Purrely, but I think under Centurion, because Centurion's combo is quite consistent and also very, very disruptive. So that's what I think of the current meta. As I already said, this will change come Phantom Nightmare release. Then we will definitely have the fire decks on top here. We are entering the big fire meta, so if you want to invest in fire decks now, go do it. You need your Wanted engine, you need your Sympho spoiled stuff that will be very expensive, so keep that in mind. But let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think these placements are correct? Do you think they are wrong? Let me know what you would have placed differently. Other than that, thanks for being here. If you are still here, if you like my content, please consider subscribing, hitting the thumbs up and the notification bell, and we will see each other in the next one.